Chapter 11. It takes two to marry and two to divorce. My answer would come in a most unexpected way. In February 2013, I attended a men's retreat. Although I really wanted to open up and share with the group about the serious breakdown in my relationship with my wife, I held back. I didn't want to violate the privacy I still felt obliged to honor in my relationship with my wife. Then on the last day of the retreat, I participated in an archery activity. In the midst of shooting arrows, there it was again, the sound of that bird ringing loud and clear. What were the odds that the man standing next to me would be an avid bird watcher? "Frank, that's the bird." I told the men a little bit about the bird before. Frank wasn't sure about its identity but whistled to it, and the bird responded. Frank recorded the sound on his iPhone as they sang back and forth to one another. 24 hours later, I received a text message. "Chris, it's a black-capped chickadee." I grabbed my Animal Speak book by Ted Andrews to learn about the bird. I knew this bird was my spirit animal. According to Andrews, the black-capped chickadee was the bird of truth. One of the main characteristics of the chickadee was that upon hearing its beautiful song, individuals were enabled to express their truth with others more joyfully. And by expressing that truth, they were able to share their innermost feelings with one another in a loving manner, even if the truth hurt. When I read this description, the black-capped chickadee, I knew that the time was getting closer for me to express more of my truth, even though I knew that my truth would lead me straight into a storm with my spouse. 4 months later, we had dinner and drinks with some friends. Afterwards, I wanted to go home, but she wanted to stay out. All the husbands were tired, including me, so I drove home while the wives stayed out for more drinks. When I returned home, I sat out on the porch thinking about how sad it was that our marriage had slipped away and that the life we had created was not working. I picked her up some hours later thinking my marriage was crumbling. When we went to bed that night, I couldn't fall asleep. I paced around our bedroom asking God for help, but received no response. As an effort to resolve our disconnect, we set an appointment with a holistic marriage counselor to sort things out. During that appointment and subsequent appointments, we parsed through our entire 17-year marriage and past history together. What I realized was that the spiritual disconnect between us had vastly widened since we moved to Birmingham in 2006. Both of us felt a sense of betrayal by the other for different reasons, and we could no longer find common ground outside of our children. I needed some space, so I told my wife I'm leaving for the weekend. I'm heading to the lake. I need to be alone. I stayed at the chalets on Lake Michigan, right next to my former house. Even though it felt like my world had crumbled, I knew it was important to keep showing up for myself the best I could, as this would keep me spiritually fit and able to better work through anything that came my way. Even though I was burning with anger at God, I ran, walked on the beach, read, wrote, prayed, and meditated. Then during one of my runs, I stopped in the middle of the road and screamed. Actually, I didn't just scream, I shattered the sound barrier. It was the biggest scream of my life from the core of my being. I let the beast out, just as I had when I had hit the punching bag in my parents' basement. I felt lied to, betrayed, disrespected, and a bit lost. I was a very hurt man. I came home with renewed strength, hoping to continue to work through our issues with the holistic marriage counselor. I decided I would man up and follow in Jesus, my mentor's footsteps, the best I could. I would enjoy the time I spent with my kids and make the best of the situation. Jesus had been my mentor since my mid-20s because I had never found a male mentor in my life. Also, every time I encountered a problem, I would ask, what would Jesus do? A few weeks later, we piled in the car and traveled to my wife's parents' house for the July 4th weekend. Shortly after arriving at their home, I decided to go for a run. About 1/4 mile into the woods, I dropped to my knees. The voice was speaking to me. "Chris, this will be the last time you run here." In that moment, I made a choice. I decided to completely shift my attitude. I welcomed joy and peace into my life, regardless of the pain that this marriage had brought me to. The next 3 days were filled with fun and connection, which included my time with my wife. The girls and I jumped on the trampoline in the pond and played tag. Her father and I displayed fireworks at night, and later my wife, the girls, and I collected branches for a nighttime hot dog roast. We also walked around the property with the dogs that evening. I interacted with everyone and focused on what I was thankful for. I was grateful to be spending quality time with my family and to acknowledge her parents' presence in my life. I realized I had the power within me to choose how to respond in this situation. It was futile for me to try to control my spouse or anyone else. All I could control was my response in any given situation. As soon as we returned home, we visited the holistic marriage counselor. During the session, the counselor presented 3 options. The first option was do nothing, continue the path we treaded on, and pretend everything was okay. The second option was to get a divorce, and the third was to be in the present, move past the feelings of betrayal, dig deep, and do the work to maintain our marriage. I said to my wife, if we were to have a chance, we're going to have to fight through this together. If we come out the other side, we will have the opportunity for a great marriage. She replied, Chris, I don't want to fight. Enveloped in sadness, I knew the marriage was over. Upon this disclosure, I badly needed my 4.5 mile run and headed off to be with my thoughts. At the end of my sprint, my eyes closed and I calmly said, God, I pray that this doesn't happen to another man. God, I'll do whatever you need to help me in this mission. When I walked in the door, I realized that I desperately needed to talk to someone. I had to grieve the end of my 17-year marriage and start to accept the reality that our divorce would be imminent. But I wasn't used to talking about my feelings. I kept all this information to myself for months without reaching out to loved ones for support. So the first person I called was my sister. Can you meet me at the park? It's an emergency. I struggled across the green as I saw my sister in the distance. She ran and caught me before I fell to the ground. I hugged her and let out the largest moan and cry of my life, even bigger than the one in Chicago from the time I curled up on the floor. Somehow I felt even more vulnerable, and this was even more painful than the time I had faced my own desire to die. This felt like a different kind of death. After I gained my composure, my sister asked, Chris, are you dying? Her question made me laugh, which gave me a small sense of relief. I sat Indian style on the picnic table, and she sat on the bench as I relayed the story of the last few months. She listened closely as I shared everything that was going on in my life. At the end of our conversation, which lasted more than an hour, she gave me a big hug and offered her support by reiterating that she was here for me in any capacity. Over the next few months, my body had been reacting as well. My foot killed me and I couldn't run. The pain in my heel was excruciating. It even brought me to my knees at times. The doctor diagnosed the pain in my foot as plantar fasciitis. In addition, my emotions were all over the place, and I knew there existed a connection between my foot and the ending of my marriage. The pain in my foot represented that I needed a change. The running in my life, which ignited the pain in my foot, was not allowing me to adequately deal with the inner turmoil I was experiencing emotionally. I tried boxing, high-intensity training, and CrossFit because I couldn't run. None of these physical activities helped me with my emotional pain. No matter how many push-ups I did, I felt restless and unfulfilled. Still, I had known this day would come when I would want to explore yoga again. I tried yoga 6 years prior, and although the physical part of the program did not resonate with me, the spiritual side and teachings intrigued me. I was initially attracted to the fact that yoga has both physical and spiritual benefits, and I thought the practice would help me work through my emotional pain at this time. Because none of the other activities were working, and I was having difficulty dealing with my emotions, I decided to give yoga another try. The end of a marriage is no easy thing. I tried to take care of myself the best I could, so I attended yoga class in the morning and evening. I continued my rosary, read, wrote my journal, and prayed big time for guidance. I also reached out to Linda. Hearing me bawl on the phone, Linda gently said, Chris, this has nothing to do with you. At the same time, you also need to take responsibility. She was right. I had to take responsibility for my part in the marriage. It takes 2 to marry, and it takes 2 to divorce. My entrepreneurial spirit had received major blows over the last 8 years with 3 unsuccessful startup companies. I didn't feel good about myself. I had isolated myself. I didn't share my feelings, stresses, or concerns. I hadn't asked for my wife's help. Instead, I promised her a life of security and stability that had slowly chipped away over the years. In my heart, and because of my past experiences, life, faith, and my trust in God, as well as my will to never give up, I knew this could all turn around for us. However, I hadn't listened to her and respected her feelings like a true partner should. When I dug deeper, I realized the divorce had nothing to do with my wife and everything to do with my relationship with God and my need to prioritize that relationship. The isolation I felt from God was me not listening to Him, and that had spilled over into our marriage. Like when I hit rock bottom gambling. God came into my life again. This time God wanted to catch my attention. In truth, I wasn't angry at my wife. I was angry at myself for creating a life that wasn't working for me. What's next? One November morning, as I practiced the rosary, I stopped in the middle of it. Once in a while that happened if I fell into prayer or a meditative state. This time, though, my heart told me to grab a pen and my journal. I opened my journal, and as the pen hit the paper, these words effortlessly came out. For my highest good, let her go. For her highest good, let her go. For the highest good, let her go. I love her, so let her go. I love me, so let her go. I called my wife and calmly said I'm filing for divorce. She cried on the other end of the line, as we both knew it was over for good. That same day, I met with my partners and called my investors and told them I was leaving the startup company for personal reasons. In truth, I knew the days of leading this company were over, and I needed to focus on my physical, mental, emotional, spiritual well-being. It was an emotional night. My wife and I gathered the girls in Ava's room and told them that we loved each other, but we didn't want to be married anymore. We all shed tears and hugged each other. Our dog Buddy helped as our daughter Simone cuddled him on the floor. I felt very grateful for the time I had with my wife. It was all purposeful. I prayed and sent the blessing of gratitude out into the universe and released it. Laura, thank you for being a part of my life. Many blessings on your journey. Be well. So now I was ready to let go of my marriage, but the healing journey was far from over.